Welcome to the Covi Way, the podcast where we break down the intersection of people and technology, because IT shouldn't just be about fixing problems, it's about enabling people to do their best work. I'm Cody Lintz, the VP of Sales at Covi, and today we'll attempt to unravel the complexities of communications and connectivity with Daniel Bray, the founder and president of Brtel Communications. Brtel is a technology integrator based in Indianapolis that brings over 2 decades of experience to internet connectivity and telecom. They have been instrumental in helping organizations stay connected and competitive with reliable, custom-fit solutions. Daniel, thanks for joining us today. Looking forward to talking to you. I know we go way back. Again, I say this in almost every episode because it feels like we're always bringing things out, but full disclosure, Daniel is Thomas's dad. So you,
a very proud dad.
Yes, yeah. I'm a very proud coworker. Thank you for bringing Thomas our way. I've known you since 2019, I believe.
Around there, yeah.
And then Thomas joined us in 2024, and I think you've worked in and around us for a decade or so before then as well.
Yeah, informally.
With ECS days and things of that.
Yep.
Yeah. Over the next 30 minutes or so, I'm just going to ask you some questions. I know we're going to dive into how you help solve really simple to really complex problems in the internet connectivity and telephony space. And
it's all over the board.
Try to trip you up as many times as I can, but probably fail. So if you don't mind, can we start in the beginning with why did you start your own company and how'd you do it?
I was a really grumpy employee. I worked for carriers for 15 years of my career, and I just kept getting stonewalled. And I realized that not every carrier was quality. And just because they paid my paycheck, I had to toe the party line. And I realized after a while that it's like, well, I need to represent everyone. And I need to go out on my own because, first of all, I'm not a very good employee because I just want to do my own thing and leave me alone. And some bosses did that very well, and other bosses did not like that at all, especially my last one. And I just said that's
why
enough.
It was the last.
Yes, it's enough is enough. And so I went out and I found pretty much all the carriers in the market at that time. All the names have changed since then. Except for AT&T. Yeah, except for AT&T. Yeah. They're the only one with the same name.
And some of them are gone completely.
Oh,
like
absolutely.
Cincy Bell.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so I just decided to match the carrier with the customer instead of trying to shove one company's products down everybody's throat as a salesperson. Because when you work there, you have no choice.
Yeah, you do what you do.
Yeah.
It's like I sell Covi. Actually, no, we introduce you and third parties all the time.
Yeah, you do all. But
so, yeah, maybe by design, Chip, the founder of Covi, designed this so that we could avoid the problem that you left for.
There you go. And you also will tell someone if you're not a good fit. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to do that in the carrier world.
That's true. You got to get that deal.
You've got to get every deal. You can never say no. You can never fire a customer. You can never not do a proposal, even if you know it's the wrong one. Oh, and so I don't have those problems anymore.
Did you ever have a time? I'm guessing you had a bunch of them, but do you remember any specific time when you had to force something in or force a deal through that you knew wasn't the best fit for the client, and then it came back to bite the carrier you worked for at the time?
Wow. You're asking me to go back to some cobwebs there.
It is.
I know I had some really bad fits, but
no is an okay answer.
There's one. I worked for MCI back in the day, and their entire redundancy for the state of Indiana was one DS3 of connectivity between one part of their network and another part of their network. And I was in a presentation, and the FAA had taken like 2/3 of that for a
wow.
Yeah. So we had like one DS3 of connectivity, which is 28 channels of voice at the time, or 28 channels of T1s. And the customer looked at me and he said, "How redundant is your redundancy?" And I just had to say, "It's not."
A little bit?
Yeah, compared to the whole state of Indiana, and we didn't get the deal, of course, because once they know what they're talking about and they see, they see something that's trying to have the wool pulled over, then they just walk away. And he did, and I didn't blame him. But it was just, there's nothing I could say. It's like, well, I just work here.
Yeah, transparency. Yep. I always say, like, if you set out to do the right thing every time and you're transparent, then the worst thing you ever have to do is apologize for a mistake.
Yep.
And so I've lived that way since my door knocking construction days. I don't know if it's in my DNA or I just heard it and grabbed it or I just thought of it and ran with it, but it has probably been the greatest de-stressor as a relationship manager, account manager, salesperson in multiple industries over the last 2 decades of my life. So
birth order might have had a play a part in that, but
I was oldest, so
that
oldest of none. So I was also, my sister is 7 years younger than me. But,
so she's the oldest.
That usually resets the cycle.
Yes, it
and
does.
So it's 2 oldest.
Yep.
But we were only in the same household when she had her frontal lobe started developing for like a year or 2 before we were in different households. So I was basically an only through my
and so was she
teenage years.
Right.
Yep. So I think you may have already answered this. So if you have, just give me a quick reiteration of it. But when you stepped out, besides the personal pain that you stepped out and started your own business for, what other like primary pain or problem were you trying to solve?
Appreciate that. There were so many choices and people were so confused, and the technology at that time, compared to now it was terrible. And I had to navigate the different carriers because it wasn't a one size fits all. It wasn't simple like it is now. It was much more, even though the technology was worse, I'll say, there was a huge delta between ABC carrier and XYZ carrier. And we really had to listen because the customers didn't understand what all these acronyms were. There was no IT
That's still
back
a
then.
thing.
Yeah, there was no IT back then.
I forgot you predated information technology.
Yeah, we're talking the early 90s, and so we have the telecom industry has terrible acronyms and always has, but it was mainly because the AT&T employees didn't want the customers to know what all this stuff was and why it was.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Like if you go back to the numbering, all the central offices, they would all use all these code names and all these things, and just to be secretive and to not let the customer know what they were talking about. And I was like, why do you keep doing this? We need to explain what's going on to the customer. And so I just said, okay, forget it. I'm going to do that. And so I'm going to clear the fog of war and explain to them what's going on, and they've appreciated it.
I think I was working with you on a client who was looking at a new fiber connection to go from a coax to fiber, and they couldn't do it because we were missing a flower pot and a handhold, and so when you talk about like the hidden codes back then, I'm like, now there's the actual terminology for real things nowadays,
right? But they still
that's
call
internet,
them
not phones,
stupid things, I heard the term flower pot last week, and I started joking. I'm like, well, are we going to go to Lowe's and get another one?
Yeah, do we need some topsoil?
Right, yeah, exactly. What are we going to put in it? So
you're still navigating a similar, completely different reality, but similar problem.
Right, exactly. And that really boils down to my entire, I'll say my entire business plan has been taking complicated things and making them simple, but also tailoring them to the audience. So I have a CIO who's a great example. I'm not going to mention any names, but he's a CIO and he makes big bucks running a big company, and he doesn't have a clue. And then I'll have an office manager who has been around. She mostly runs a 15-person shop, and she knows almost as much as I do, even though she doesn't get paid because she is like on the ground and she is engaged and she asks questions, and the CIO is just kind of up in this, on the cloud, the cloud in the sky, and he doesn't know what's really going on, and he just depends on a lot of other people, but he's trying to make decisions in a vacuum, and I'm kind of like, okay, time out. Let me let me help you navigate this, and he so far has not thanked me or apologized for pretending like he knows what's going on, but I'm okay with that. I don't need that to cash the check,
Yeah, because the relationship trumps the
ego.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Yep. And if it doesn't, then you're in trouble.
Oh, well, let's dive into that.
Yeah.
I agree with the statement, but what do you mean?
Well, if I take everything personally and I get offended and I demand appropriate recognition for the things that I do, then I'm not going to succeed for very long. I tell people when I go and install phone systems, the end users, I go in there and they don't know who I am. The only person that knows who I am is the person who made the decision.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I go around everybody's desks, I crawl under their desk and plug things in. And some of them treat me like complete dirt. I'm just
they don't know you're the owner of
They don't know I'm the owner of the company. I'm the janitor as far as they're concerned. And they're waiting for me to, they're waiting for it to enter their trash while I'm down there, and it keeps me humble. And I don't mind that. Some days I walk out and I just shake my head and think, if they only knew, but that's okay. It keeps me humble and I enjoy that part of the business. Some people are like, why are you still doing that? It's like, because I really like it. It's weird, but I like it. It's voice, I came from the voice side. So I've been doing voice for 35 years. Internet, when I was at Ameritech, they wouldn't sell internet. They wouldn't let me sell it. They said, oh, Indianapolis isn't a big enough market for us to bring internet there. And I was like, how much
this is after we had a football team.
Yeah. How much do you need me to sell? This was 2002. And I said,
how much? Way after we had a football team.
Yeah. How much do you need me to sell? And they were like, well, we need you to sell 400 and some circuits. And I'm like, we can do that, in a year. Absolutely. And they were like, no. And they literally would not, they wouldn't bring it to Indianapolis. And so I left the company and went elsewhere because it was just ridiculous. So, but the voice, the background in the voice really still applies. Like all those stupid acronyms, all those things,
really?
they still flow through. And that background helps me simplify things for the customer.
Yeah. You do it for me all the time for our clients.
And most of the people who were a little older than I am have all retired. So there aren't many left, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And scary. Or, depending on which side of the table you're sitting on, it's scary or it's exciting. So
Yep.
I'm on the scary side, but that's unfortunate. Going back to relationships, how do you have that historical knowledge, all those acronyms, you have all sorts of probably people's cell numbers at places to be able to back channel things because of your history of contacts. But how do you balance keeping up with cutting edge technology and the customizing and tailored pieces that you mentioned earlier, while also delivering really good support, making people feel cared for and heard, and like your empathetic piece? It's a lot for, you're 3 people, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot for like, you guys feel like at least a 5 to 10 person company when I work with you. So how do you balance that and make it work without, the burning candles at both ends reality? Sometimes
it doesn't. Sometimes we do burn the candle at both ends, and that's just reality. But asking a ton of questions, that is really, sometimes it just feels like an interrogation, because I just need to know these things that most people don't think about on a daily basis. So when I start asking questions, they're like, oh man, I don't even know the answer to that question. And then I'll set up, a list of questions that I'll email them, because that's the only way to really get to the pain point and to really understand how I can help them. Not just, it's great to save them money. That's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
I've got a great story of a company in Crawfordsville, but it's really productivity. It's like, okay, we can save you a little bit of money, and is it going to save the company if you go out of business? Absolutely not. If we make $1,000 a month impact on your budget, that's a wonderful thing, but it's not going to keep you in business if you have unproductive employees. So I'm always harping on productivity. How many minutes a day is each of your employees sitting there waiting for something to happen? And if your bandwidth isn't sufficient, or you don't have a backup, you don't have redundancy, you don't have the right infrastructure, you are burning your customers' time, and they're angry and their morale goes down and they leave the company. It's a buyer's market for employees right now. And so if someone gets up to here, before they wouldn't leave because they didn't know if they could get another job. Well, they can get another job. And so that's really the center of the whole thing, is figuring out how do we maximize productivity to potentially, not have to hire another person, or hire another person because you've got so much business because everybody else is producing at that point.
No, that's we and especially in our like primary assessment that we do to score best practices for technology from an overview perspective. We do an impact version, and one of the things we are primarily focused on, like you said, the finances. What's our impact on payroll? Then also talent acquisition and talent retention is so huge, and we always focused on it. And then we added to that in the assessment when COVID hit, and the just craziness of employment and hybrid work and everything. I have found, for me personally, that is my favorite piece of the puzzle, is the people. And so that's one of the things I wanted to bring out, is how the synergy that we have in our like partnership from a vendor to vendor perspective, or partner to partner perspective, is I believe because both organizations, you at the head of yours, Chip founded ours, and Dave runs it now, and our entire leadership team, me included, are so focused on, we are a people first organization, internally and externally. And I don't experience that in your field very often. And so
that's the differentiator.
Is that a strategic differentiator, or is it just part of your DNA, or like both? Like, how does that work?
I would say it's both, because, there aren't a lot of young people coming into our business right now. And I know a lot of people say that, but because they don't want to pick up the phone. They're just, the phone has always been heavy. I have to admit, early days, that phone weighed like 20 pounds, and to get it up to your ear to make a call. But even with current customers, email is very efficient, texting is efficient, but we just want to talk to people. And because if you don't talk to them, they won't really tell you what's going on. And you can't really fix anything until people tell you what's going on. And it just is a requirement, but it's also just part of who we are, because we came from the voice side. It's just, we're just already attuned to using the phone instead of not.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I have a door knocking background, so it was doors and phones and, feet on pavement. And I still find, when I was incredibly over capacity before, we hired another customer steward to help, that I would be like working at night, after hours. I shouldn't say at night, but after 5, and I'd be like, oh man, I should, like, this phone call would be so great right now, but like, they're eating dinner. I can't do it. And,
I'm not going to call them.
I was always in such conflict, because I was like, I could wait and do it tomorrow, but then the waiting could lead to the forgetting that you could. And so I would just send the email and try to make the call, and then feel bad about the double hit and the extra, flag in your inbox, because I hate an email that didn't need to be there. Like you said, it's efficient, unless there's so much that it's not. And so that having that calibrated correctly, whether it's
tailoring it,
personal process or some type of technical filter, is so important.
And as you know, most IT people are email centric, and most HR people are voice centric.
That's a good point. I've never thought about it.
Yeah, most HR people, which sometimes they're over telecom, and the finance people, they're much more, they want to talk about it. The IT people are like, no, I'm just going to email you. We're going to get this done in 15 seconds. It's going to be done.
And I have to have my track record so I can look back when I forget.
Right. Yeah.
Which I get.
Oh, me too. I keep record of everything. And then sometimes it's reversed, which is really weird. I get an IT person who won't send me an email, but he calls me every time. And it's like, okay, I just have to know that and be okay with that.
Yep.
So
you had mentioned just a minute ago, you had alluded to the answer to this question, but you didn't quite dive in there. So I'm going to go ahead and ask these questions in the reverse order. So I apologize if you prepared that well, but
No.
where you, can you give me an example from your past or even this week or whatever, where you brought order to chaos from a situation where either their IT resources, whether it's internal or an outsourced third party, and you just weren't on the same page and you had to get it all untangled, usually because someone in that equation is operating without the understanding that you just described you have to be successful.
Right.
Can you give us like a real world example of that?
I can without mentioning names.
Yes.
But this is one of my favorites. It was about 10 years ago. I was brought into a manufacturing concern over in Crawfordsville. And the big thing about relationships is, companies change, people leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some customers that I've been the single only person who's been involved with that company for that period of time. So like over 10 years, everybody has left except for me.
That's absurd.
And so the new people come in and they go, "Who are you?" And I say, "Well, this is what I do." And they go, "Oh, good." Because now I don't have to do that.
Uh-huh.
And then they leave. And then it happens over and over again. So this particular customer had that happen. The person who had bought all of this garbage years and years ago left the company. The new people came in. And as a friend of mine calls it, they waited and paid it. If it didn't change much from the last month, they just paid the bill.
Mm-hmm.
And they paid astronomical AT&T bills that they should never have been paying. I ended up pulling about $7,000 a month out of their budget because they had been paying for services for 10 years that they hadn't been using.
Oh,
and
wow.
Because there were so many generations of
Do you think that's common still?
It still is.
Oh, wow.
Yes. I have one from about 3 years ago. That was $30,000 a month by the time I was done.
So I'm going to ask this as a question form, but it's like an assumptive thing. This is for me and my own daily activities here,
Mm-hmm.
but for you as well, if you're a leader of an organization, is it safe to assume that if they're not on VoIP or internet-based phones, they could have potential for that problem?
It's more likely, more likely if they haven't updated their technology,
Mm-hmm.
it's more likely that they have this legacy stuff that nobody has touched. When you ignore things, they grow. And negative things.
The migration we did late last year for one of our CPA clients,
Mm-hmm.
they had a really old system.
Yep.
And what was the savings in that situation?
It was about half. It ended up being beautiful. But if you're not doing an annual review of
Mm-hmm.
all the bills that you pay, you are purposefully allowing yourself to be taken advantage of. And that's even today. Comcast, not to throw them under the bus, I love them, but their goal is for you to go off of contract and for your bill to double. It's just that simple. They will not reach out to you.
Is that why that happens?
Yes.
This isn't a contact. This is
Sure.
provider
It
agnostic
happens
from my
time.
perspective, but
Mhm.
I'm talking about my personal life.
Sure.
Where I'm like, hey, I don't want this to ever change.
Right.
I actually got business class internet at my house so that I didn't have to deal with all the
Mm-hmm.
consumer grade promotional things. So
Sure.
I was like, I don't care if I pay more. I just want it stable.
Right. Yep.
So
And their entire business model is getting a good rate for 2 years. And then once it goes off contract, they're going to ignore it. And they just hope you keep paying it. And so
I'm intrigued by the
it's amazing.
statistics that come with that.
Yes.
Like, how many stay? How many go? How many stay and are angry? How many don't know? Like,
I'll say 75% of them don't even notice
wow.
because it's a
on
utility
auto
bill.
pay.
Yeah,
and
it's on auto pay. They don't see the credit card every month. They don't review it. If you're not doing an annual review of every bill you pay, especially in our world, we find $420 elevator lines on the regular. Like just about every month, one of our customers is paying $200 to $400 a month for an alarm line or an elevator line to AT&T. I did one just this week, and we keep blasting them. Send us your bills. Send us your bills. Send us your bills. And some do, most don't. And then they'll be like, all of a sudden, what's this bill? And I'm like, I've never seen it before, and I've been taking care of you for 5 years. You've never sent it to me. And so those are the things that are just so much fun.
For in the business space, we're seeing AI engines get integrated to the back end of financial platforms like a QuickBooks Online or a
Sure.
Sage
Yep.
Intact. And so I assume that what I'm about to say will transcend personal finance and personal connectivity into the business space, probably this year, if not tomorrow, for all we know.
Right.
But throwback to a previous podcast, I'm now a Wi-Fi user. Thank you, Eric Zong. And that solution or something like a Monarch that will flag you and let you know when your recurring bills have gone up.
Nice.
And so that's actually how I caught that with my internet provider a couple years ago, or it's last year actually. So yeah, little impromptu tech tip for you.
Yeah, it's and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With that moment in mind, we talked about like there was the chaos, there's the financial side to that you just talked about. Do you have a most memorable like integration moment or client acquisition moment where it's just like, this was insane or this was epically awesome or something like that you could share?
I'll say the other one that I mentioned from 3 years ago. I sat down with the CFO down in Atlanta and I laid out my proposal and it was a mess. It was just an absolute mess. And I hadn't even gotten all the bills. I was just going off of what I had. And I said, you're looking at $12,000 to $15,000 a month in savings. And he said, And I was like, excuse me? And he was like, it's a small line item. I don't care. And I said, we'll split it. I said, let me do it and we'll split it.
Yeah.
And he was he kind of laughed at me. And then he was like, the meeting's over. And then the IT director said, no, we're going to do this.
That's crazy.
But that was the CFO.
In my experience, it usually goes the other way around. I work with the CEO or the CFO, and they help me get the IT resources on board, whether that's the officer level or the director or whatever. And so not always is it that way, but usually because we're taking that strategic lens and they're focused on the tactical, as they should be.
Right.
And it's just a different presentation for a different
for sure.
Role. And usually we don't get the option to do both. And so it's kind of that roundabout way to get there. Yours was the other way around, which is kind of funny.
And by the time we got all the bills, it ended up being about $30,000 a month in savings.
Yeah.
And they're completely on all new technology, all new fiber, all new cloud voice. They're all integrated. Everything is beautiful. But it was the first blush was, it's not worth it. And I about jumped out of the chair.
That was a month, right?
Yeah, per month. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a pretty nice annual operating budget. I'm going to shift gears back to like some more tactical things, even though those were really fun stories. So anytime you can tell a story, please pull it out. I love them. A lot of what you deal with today is somewhat out of the box with add-ons and things you can do to them, but you have an internet connection, whether it's low end, coax. Cable broadband coax, or it's dedicated fiber on the high end with all this throughput and really high pricing. Then you have your phone products, which are going to be an out of the box VoIP system,
cloud voice,
and that a client could manually configure their call flow. I know they use you a lot for that configuration as well, but you are constrained by whatever that manufacturer and software vendors feature set is.
Correct.
So how do you approach the customization and the tailorization within those out of the box scenarios?
Sometimes we have to break some rules to do that. Like the carrier will say, well, this is how we go about doing this. And these are the parameters that you have. And with a lot of experience and talking to the people behind the scenes, we'll figure out ways to leverage the feature set in ways that they didn't intend, which tends to be the best results.
So it's not an advertised feature. It's like you combine some features together to make a new feature.
Right. To accomplish the customer's end goal, but not do it in the way that the bean counters or the product manager wants us to do it. And that's a lot of fun when we can get creative, and especially when my team does that without me. That's
I know.
so
I totally get
exciting
that.
because,
Yeah.
I try not to be everything for everyone, but to empower them and to encourage them to, hey, think about this, and call so-and-so and ask them, how do you accomplish this? And that's been a lot of fun. That's really, as we wait for the carriers to roll out new features, we try to front end it and either be a beta test or to just make it work to the end user and transparent to the callers without necessarily getting permission.
Yeah. I mean, forgiveness, not permission is sometimes the way, especially in this space where I feel like that's less of a rule and more of a guideline.
Right. Yeah,
So,
for sure. Yeah.
Within your process, because I know that when we have a mutual client that we're somewhat integrated together in process, but I don't know it. I don't have a clear picture of how you're doing things behind the scenes. So in that process, and you already answered I ask a lot of questions answer here. So that's no longer an acceptable answer to this question. But within your process, how do you work to uncover the individual needs of an organization or different departments within an organization, or even just a particular end user if you have like a power user?
A lot of what we do, I'll say 80-20 rule, 80% is cookie cutter. It's just, here are your 5 things. Because I told Thomas growing up, people do what they know and they don't do what they don't know. And that is true by and large. And he always pushed back on me with that. And 80% of the time, if you're getting them to what they know, or maybe a step further, then it's a win. It's the 20% where it's not automatable yet. And that's one thing I am working on, which we'll talk about in a second. It is truly sometimes just gutting it out and talking to, and just being on the phone for hours to try to figure out.
My VoIP administration days, I remember the back-end circuit calls. With
it just
AT&T or Earthlink or oh man, there's some old names.
Mention Earthlink. But even with the customer, contacts, because everybody's got their own perspective. And I was in a meeting last week where there were 4 people who wanted 4 different outcomes on a particular phone system. And we ended up engineering everything in a very convoluted, roundabout way. Well, now there's a new decision maker, and we sat back down. And he was like, why is this so complicated? And we said, because it was a committee. And when you have a committee, a camel is a horse, created by a committee. Then you have all of this complexity that is really unnecessary, but it made everybody happy. And so sometimes you just have
consensus.
to do that. Yeah. And other times you get to strip it all away and simplify it, because people really want simplicity. They really don't want all the complexity. And that's where IT is getting. And back in the day when there was no IT budget or there was no security budget, all that stuff is just, somewhat new in the business world, if you think about it in context. Because when I started, there was no such thing. It was, there was one computer in the office when I started.
Yep.
And we all shared it, and everybody printed off their email and took it back to their desk and cut it up with the scissors and put it in the files. It was that silly. So we try to make it and it's tailored to the audience. We try to make it simple for the people who want it to be simple. The people who want to get into the meat and potatoes and really dig into it, then we just spend a lot of time on the phone, really just talking about it, because it's not automatable yet, but we're on the cusp of it being more automatable. With
Birdie told me about that. Birdie named Thomas.
Yep.
So, would you say what percentage of your day on an average day would you spend on that 20% versus the 80? Like all of it, or?
No, it's very cyclical. There will be weeks when it's all very transactional and popcorn and surface. And those weeks are fun because it's just bang, 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 bang. You're getting a ton of work done.
Yeah, lots of check boxes.
A lot of check boxes. And then other weeks I am in the weeds, so it's very cyclical. It seems to go in waves, similar to the way the carriers used to be, where they would work really hard, they would get successful, they would do wonderful things. And then and Comcast is past that peak now. So they were really hard for a long time. They were the premier company, and now they're on the backside of that cycle. They are falling apart inside and out, and they're frustrating me.
And that's a normal cycle for
that's
different
what I've
providers and
seen for
carriers?
35 years.
I had
The carriers
no idea.
do this. They work really hard. They get really good. And then something happens, whether the bean counters get
Let's
put
say
in
it's like
charge,
cost cutting usually.
and usually cost cutting. And then all of a sudden they drop down the other side. And then another carrier will come up and say, hey, we're working really hard. We want to earn your business. And that's why I can't represent one.
That's similar to the Amazon story where Bezos ran in a negative until the shareholders were like, no more negatives. And then he, and so.
But weeks are like that, and months are like that. So I'll be in the weeds for a week or two. This week has been a lot of weed pulling, and then other weeks are just simple. And I'm not on the phone much at all. But this week I've been on the phone almost nonstop. Yeah. So it's an interesting dynamic where sometimes voice takes precedent, and I'm doing all phone systems, and the next time period it's all internet, and so it's bizarre like that.
We talked about transparency, ensuring that you understand the real problem or problems, a lack of ego or negative ego, I should say. What else do you believe makes a really good partnership work?
It's kind of cliche, but honesty. As you said earlier, all you can do is ask for forgiveness, because everybody makes mistakes, but it's the folks that I work with that I realize you're not being honest with me, whether it's a customer or a partner, and it has to be over the long term. You can't just do a flash in the pan and take your money and run. If you do that, you're in trouble. At some point, you're in trouble when you do that. And some people just don't understand that. They just think they can get away with it. So the honesty and the transparency and the willingness to stay in your lane. I'm big on staying in my lane. I love my lane. And by golly, if somebody says, hey, will you do this for us?
Want to manage firewalls and switches and wireless
I
access
will not
points?
sell security. No, thank you very much. But, people ask me, hey, will you do this for us? And it's like, no, I will not. Let me call your MSP, because that, even though I could, and I might make some money on it, but the relationship is far more important to me than any single customer, any single deal, or any single add-on or whatever. I think, respecting your peers and your partner's lanes is extremely important. And, this is a small town. And I had somebody ask me recently, well, why should we do business with you? I'm like, ask anyone in town. I've been here 35 years and I've never screwed anyone.
Yeah.
And if you can find someone that thinks I screwed them, then I'll go fix it. Because they were like, I've heard the name, but how do I know? And it's so if you don't live your life like that, you're always going to be looking over your shoulder, and you're going to lose all your allies.
Yep. In my construction days, we did storm restoration like nationwide. The company I worked for was the first formalized storm restoration contractor.
Wow.
Storm chasers that became a real thing, basically. And when I was in Wichita for a storm, I can't remember what year that was. I had like 7 or 8 houses on this one street, and one of the neighbors came and he's like, I really want to use you, but I really want to do someone local. And I was like, that's fine. You can do someone local. And I was like, what's your main reason to do it? Like, cause we come in and do storms all the time. We only do 2% of the business because the local contractors can't keep up. That was always what I said. And that was a real metric. And he said, well, I'm afraid you'll leave and you won't cover warranty. And I just want someone who's been here for a long time and, decades over decades of success. And I said, okay, well, who are you thinking about? And he showed me who he was thinking about. And I pulled up Google on my laptop in my truck. And I was like, so this particular shop or company has been filing bankruptcy about every 10 years. And
wow.
And then rebranding. And they're saying they're 60 years old, but as the entity they are now, they're only 8. And I said, what that means is each time they filed bankruptcy, all their warranties were null and void. And so we've been around for, it was 25 years or something. I don't remember the number anymore. And we go back and do our problem repairs each time there's a warranty, or we contract it through a local contractor. I got that deal, but it's one of those things where it's like the honesty piece is like, you're not 70 years. Like, I can just Google that. Like, I didn't go look at any county records or anything. I was just Google pulling different things up.
But I've also seen that in your world, in the MSP world.
Oh yeah,
I've seen that over and over
where people
and over again.
file bank or go out of business and
yeah,
shutter
they
and,
change their name and they protect the innocent, or to protect the
I
guilty.
I haven't noticed that.
Oh my
I'm
goodness,
gonna have to look into it now.
Yeah, I've seen that so many times. There's a couple of companies that I've been around who have changed their name like 4 or 5 times in the last 10 years.
I mean, we've changed our
And-
name technically once,
But
but
but that wasn't for protection
No,
purposes.
it was so we didn't sound like an internet provider.
There you go. Yeah. Like
We
the
went
poor people that
from NetLink to Covi because we were like, yeah, we evolved together with you, co-evolution and partnership, instead of we provide internet circuits, which we never did.
right. The poor company that was called Spectrum here in town. When Spectrum bought Bright House,
I remember that.
Suddenly 5,000 old ladies were calling their help desk for help with their cable modems. I talked to those guys. I felt so sorry for them.
Oh my gosh. I didn't even think about that.
Yes,
That's
it was
insane.
but I have seen that many, many times where people ask me, oh, have you heard of XYZ IT firm? And I'm like, nope, never heard of them because they used to not be that a year ago.
Uh-huh.
And so when you mention that, you're being humble about that in your industry, but it happens all the time in your business.
Wow. I'm going to have to get more. A future podcast, the craziness of MSP name changes.
Yes.
That is coming soon to a Covi Way near you. What, if there's one thing you can choose from for today in the communications and internet connection space, what's one thing that a business leader or a primary decision maker for IT for a company should be focusing on?
I'll say the C-suite, whether it's the IT director or not. The alternatives to cloud voice, there are out there, and they are sometimes less expensive. But the problem is the person who implements it, if they leave the company, nobody knows what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I had that happen up in northern Indiana. They did a 3CX system. The entire phone system was sitting on a laptop, on a residential grade laptop, sitting on a foam block inside of a data center with fans blowing all over it, like hot fans. And the guy left the company. And I was just, when they told me the story, I was dumbfounded. And so
that's what this space is.
when you put all of your eggs in a single technology basket that only one person can facilitate and manage, you are asking for serious trouble down the line. If you're working with any cloud voice provider, I'll say, I prefer us, but any of them, you can always call an 800 number and say, hey, do this, and they'll do it.
You've always got that big team behind.
Right. You've always got a team. And with us, we want to get our customers out of the phone business. I say that all the time. Get out of the phone business. Your time is way too valuable. Every minute of your day is worth a lot more than you messing with moves, adds, and changes on a big phone system. And so I would say that's the number one thing. Internet's internet. It's becoming more commoditized if it possibly can be, and so more is better. More carriers is better. Redundancy, that's always a good thing. But on the, for some companies, voice is irrelevant. But for still 80% of the companies, it's their lifeline. And if you put all your eggs in a basket that can't be managed or can't be replaced, then you're in trouble, in my opinion.
Nope. I think that I will agree with that from a business continuity perspective and a unified communications perspective. It makes a lot of sense. What's one rumor or myth about IT services, whether it's in my space or yours, because I know you kind of cross-pollinate a little bit there, that you wish people understood better?
It is not an expense. It is an investment. Especially now, with goodness gracious, with all the quantum stuff coming up, quantum security, all that stuff, is some foreign adversary going to go after Joe Schmo's electric company? No. But security, maybe.
Depends on who they're servicing.
Right. You never know, because how did Target get hacked? They got hacked through the HVAC system. And nobody was watching the HVAC system. So, complete rock solid security and rock solid IT support. As I said earlier, when I started, there was no IT budget. Nobody had computers on their desks, and then it evolved. But I still hear customers say, well, that's just, that IT proposal or whatever it was, that security system was too expensive. and nobody cares about us. They're not going to hack us. And I don't make any money on it. I don't want to make any money on it, but I want to say, please, change that, open your mind to that, because normalcy bias is real. And just because you haven't been hacked doesn't mean you're not going to be hacked, because it tends to mean that you're going to be hacked because you haven't yet. You haven't set up the security and you haven't set up the defense. So that's a big one for me, even though I don't do that for a living.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to end from a questions perspective with the cheat question, and that's just like, what's next for you?
I think AI.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna start building that stack, even with our small team. The CEO from Shopify this week, he said, "I will not hire another employee unless you can prove to me that AI can't do that job."
That's a bit aggressive, but it's also progressive. I think from a timeline perspective, the world's not ready for that yet, but it seems like where we're going.
To hear a CEO of a tech company say that right now, it's like, well, if you don't at least listen and think about how that affects you and your industry, I think you're just, I don't think that's wise. And even for a 3-person firm, I think I'm going to figure out, okay, how much can we automate? Because we're not automated now. And if we can scale and maybe not have to hire a 4th person with the tools that are out there, why not use them? So
I'm working on getting a client guest, to talk about some process re-engineering we did for him, similar to what you just said. Apart from AI at this current stage, this was a entrepreneur who was on his own, solopreneur at the time. The vision was to grow to a team of 5, and he switched to a new business coach or mentor, and that helped him realize that he could change some things about his strategic plan. And then our team was able to help re-engineer his workflows and processes and adjust some technical solutions along the way that led to where he now is going to pursue the same revenue growth with no hires. Wow. And so that's without AI. So understanding, like, you get the right technical foundation there and standard operating procedure foundation there. The next step is, if you get all of that digitized so that an AI can analyze it, they're going to automate anything that we usually say that is not the meaningful work. Getting on the phone and making the call.
Yep. Right.
Even though I know there's some AIs that can do some of that.
Sure.
Usually those calls aren't as meaningful as when a human does. No. So it's not about getting rid of jobs. It's about having humans do human activities.
Right. Exactly. Let the machines do the machine work.
Yep. Which leads us to our tech tip of the day. Daniel, I know you would say in this scenario, get a redundant circuit. And I agree with that for most cases, especially for larger, more mature organizations. But everything runs on internet. All the cloud-based phones that you've talked about in this podcast has been internet-based. So if the internet goes down, those phones in some way, shape, or form goes down. So the tech tip of the day is make sure you have some redundant plan or actual redundant solutions for your internet connection, whether that be failover internet. So when one goes down, the other picks it up, and you might have a few seconds of blip, or you have a plan where if the internet goes down, all your employees pull out their hotspots and turn on their Wi-Fi, and your phone system runs over to the soft phone application that's on their mobile device. If you don't have a documented plan, it means all you have is chaos. So when internet is concerned, make sure you have a backup plan for when the internet goes down. And thanks for coming today.
My pleasure.
Thank you all for attending, and that's the Covi Way.